To Be Hero X is an astonishing anime. The first episode is something quite remarkable. Animation-wise, it's immaculate, truly finger-licking good content. When it comes to scrapping, To Be Hero can compete with likes of JJK or that one arc from Frieren. Story-wise, it's also pretty good, a bit fast-paced, but still good nonetheless. As for character design, what else can I say except the sauce is definitely there. I mean, the waifus are fine as hell. Makima and Echidna will forever hold my heart, but damn, this anime shook my heart a little. I'm not sure exactly what I was expecting when I first dipped my toes into this anime, but I know for sure it wasn't this. If I'm being completely transparent, I thought we'd get a tournament arc styled anime with phenomenal animation and choreography, mainly oriented on the top 10 heroes to see who claims the title of X. Instead, we get this really cool world where anyone can become a hero. Due to this, well, I suppose it's due to the way the power system is structured, right? Because you see, the only thing defining the heroes at the top from those at the bottom is fame and faith, or rather in their words, trust. In essence though, this trust works a lot like the attention we provide to influencers or celebrities. The greater trust in said hero, the greater power that they wield. And for that reason, Astro's Speed would probably end up as a god in the society, for the amount of pull and the amount of reach that he has. This can also make for some strangely interesting phenomena, but we'll get to that later. Due to all these elements, even when we're not in the midst of combat, right, the story itself is quite provocative. There are a plethora of mysteries that keep you wanting more lore. I dare say the lore itself is more compelling than the action. With all that said though, let's begin. Our main character here is Lin Ling, a nobody. He works with an advertising company to provide commercials for the heroes. In this particular instance, our brother is getting absolutely demolished and roasted by his boss because of the way he structured an ad for the hero Nice. He angled it to promote everyone being capable of being a hero instead of focusing on Nice himself. Take note, Lin also sent this ad to the client on his boss's orders. This will be important later. His aspirations to become a hero have seemingly mended with his work. All his life, Lin has wanted to be special, yet he was given the short end of the stick. His boss didn't appreciate these fanciful sentiments in his work and kindly asked him to grow up. I wasn't too on board with the way his boss, we'll call him Mr. Forehead for that yee-ass haircut, abruptly destroyed Lin's dreams. However, in the end, I suppose reality is supposed to be cold. Perhaps this is simply one of those moments to Lin. Then I thought back, traced my thoughts, and realized Lin likes Nice's girlfriend. What correlation can be made between this and his current predicament? I have no idea. I mean, technically he could, he could have angled the ad in a specific way to shed more light on other people. I'm not saying he would. Our boy he's a good guy, so he would do that. I'm just saying, one could speculate. Mr. Forehead gets a call from the client, right? Not Nice himself, but some intermediary. We have no idea what was said on the call, but poor little Lin is fired immediately after it. So, using our thinking orbs, it's evident to see that the client did not receive too kindly to the ad Lin made. And Lin, heartbroken and jobless, retreats to the top of the advertising firm he used to work at. His mind dead set on doing the unthinkable. And for a fragile soul like himself, perhaps he sees this as the only escape he has left. I mean, there's no other reason one would choose to go to the top of a building other than to swim with the fishes, as the Yakuza would say, right? However, before any drastic actions were made, he decides to give his heartfelt thoughts to a billboard of Nice, flipping him off with his pinky. In some aspect, this makes sense, right? Considering his current situation is indirectly due to him. However, what he didn't expect, nor I, myself, was that Nice would show up to receive these sentiments directly. At this point, I was fully prepared for Lin to get slaughtered by Nice, right? Because I wouldn't take that, bro. I'm not gonna take disrespect when I'm floating from the sky like an angel and you're floating me off, bro. I'm gonna beat you. You're dead, okay? Then I realized this ain't. And he's no Homelander, so I became highly nervous and frantically raced for an answer as to what he would do next. What possibly could he want? But as my mind raced, he simply kept moving forward one step at a time until he was no more. And as visceral and raw as his death was, I only had a simple thought. Why would he do this? Why? What was going on, right? Lin, however, was absolutely mortified before Nice's talent manager, Miss J, kidnapped him. And after all, if Lin told anyone what occurred, she'd be screwed, right? There are a lot of questions though on how she covered up this incident besides kidnapping Lin. After all, Lin works at an advertising company in the city, and if that's the case, then there should have been multiple eyes that witnessed what happened to Nice. In which case, how exactly would she deal with all those people? Would she give them the pop? Would she kidnap them too? Pay them some money? That's just something that's been bothering me. Another issue that seemingly just popped into my mind out of nowhere is what placed Nice in his dismal mental state. It's dark. The guy could fly, and he deliberately chose to fall to his death, and it wasn't even clean. Bro had some interference on the way down. Also, before Miss J nabbed Lin, she seemed to arrive at the scene pretty quickly. Use some lackluster thoughts that I have that will probably be solved later on or have no real effect on the way the story is told. Therefore, will never be answered, or I am just simply stupid for asking them in the first place, right? Regardless of whichever it is, it was at this point I was pretty much glued to the screen. I needed answers to the mysteries that had sprouted from this simple scene. We immediately cut to Lin after the kidnapping. He's been placed in some warehouse. He's surrounded by guards and has no means of escape. Miss J cuts the chase as soon as Lin wakes up, investigating Lin to find out if he has obtained any information regarding Nice's situation. Lin, only having witnessed Nice's death and not knowing anything else, simply tells his truth. I know myself pretty well, or I'd like to think I do, and in this instance, I would probably, no cap, would have done anything she asked me to, no question. If a pretty lady kidnaps me, I ain't gonna complain, bro. Like, who should complain? Should I? Probably, probably. Will I? Definitely not. Having a yandere girlfriend is no problem. It ain't no problem. I can fix her. Trust me, bro. Lin doesn't feel the same way, though, so immediately after Miss J gets preoccupied with a call, he breaks free of his 5 guards and runs. How he pulled off a feat of insane strength, I have no clue. However, it isn't long before Miss J retaliates. The guards are too slow, so she takes it into her own hands. I love a woman who could do that. Anyway, she manifests a paint bucket and 360 no-scopes Lin while still on the call. By sheer coincidence, the white paint from the bucket Miss J threw mixed in with Lin's hair, prompting Miss J to put a hold to Lin's termination. In the beginning of the video, I mentioned that this trust-based power system would give rise to some interesting phenomena. Nice's death and Lin's similarity to Nice gave rise to such an instance. In essence, the idea Miss J thought of was to revive Nice by replacing him with Lin. As the general public had no idea of Nice's death, his trust was up for the taking, as long as someone was there to consume it. Consuming this trust would push the person who was acting as said hero to gain powers in line with what the masses dictated was appropriate. It could also develop their features to fit that image as well. So, while superheroes seem free to do what they want, right, they're actually somewhat restrained by what the public thinks they can and can't do. Which is why I'm hesitant to say that Lin got everything he wanted scot-free. Yes, he was indeed the hero he always wished to be. Yes, he was able to get Moon as his girlfriend, through being nice now, so she's technically his girlfriend. It's a cooked situation, not going to lie. However, the cost of getting such wishes actualized were far greater than he could have realized. In order for all these things to happen, he needed to watch a hero he didn't like, low-tier god themselves, get kidnapped by a hot whip. Okay, on second thought, right? There really aren't any downsides to how he obtained these things, if to discount the ethical and legal problems that come with stealing someone's identity. Speaking of which, while Miss J now has a means of saving her career through Lin, it's all based on the gamble that Lin can fool the masses into thinking that he is really nice. Just because he now has a means of gaining people's trust doesn't mean that the stream of power will continue flowing within him. If the people begin noticing things that are out of place for his character, the stream of power could be heavily impacted. So immediately after realizing this, she begins training Lin to become the next Nice. Lin is forced to learn everything about him, how he positioned himself, how he fought, how he talked, and his mannerisms as well, all in order to make sure that this gamble was a success. This situation kind of reminds me of Overlord or Liar Liar. Both anime showcase people struggling to survive in their present environments without alarming other people that they don't belong there or inexperienced in what they're doing. In Lin's case, he went from being some random schmuck on the street to one of the top heroes in the world, so he isn't an evil overlord who has to constantly worry about disappointing his subordinates, or a top-ranking kid in school who's worried about being discovered as a fraud. Out of the three, his situation is seemingly the best. After all, he's got what he's always wanted, even if it was forced on him. The previous two characters were pretty much set up to play the roles they had received or be discovered and face dire consequences. In addition, Hiroto Shinohara didn't even want the top position, and Ainz just got used to it. While the drawback of discovery is the same for all three, Lin is probably the least worried about his situation. To what extent Lin and Miss J will be punished, I honestly have no clue. It's not like they killed the Nice, but they did replace him and effectively steal his identity, so the least possible punishment is like a lot of jail time or capital punishment. But then again, they live in a different society than mine, so perhaps the rules are different. In any case, after all these preparations have been sufficiently made, Miss J decides to allow Nice to return to the limelight. Lin, playing as Nice, agrees in the beginning until he realizes he'll be performing with Moon on a dating talk show. Having made no prior arrangements to get to know her, Lin's a bit skeptical about his chances at fooling her. As these thoughts seemingly enter his mind, the reality of his situation finally begins to sink in. He becomes reluctant to do the show.
Stop the cap.
If we're being for real, Lin, you're just afraid you got El Riz.
Yet in typical Miss J fashion, she always gets what she wants, and I would do whatever she wants. I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. Anyway, she forcefully kicks him out of the car after telling him that he really has no choice because according to the news, Lin Ling is dead, and he can no longer return to his original lifestyle. Somehow, Lin manages to save his poor entrance on the red carpet and meet Moon. I'm not sure if she figured it out yet, but she takes a little bit of time before taking his hand. If that isn't the case and she hasn't figured this out, then it begs the question as to what type of relationship Nice and Moon originally had. Perhaps not all was as it seemed in Paradise, or maybe it was all a contractual facade to boost their numbers. Whatever the reason, Moon finally decides to take his hand and the scene shifts. We open in what appears to be the set of True Love Recipe. However, things don't go fully as planned. You see, the meticulous planning Miss J put in to make this dating show a hit was all for naught. The interviewer dipped due to their current host exposing him. Perhaps he had the allegations. We don't really know what the heck was going on with him. But the new host, his name is Eye of Truth and Lighter, and as you can guess, his favorite pastime is exposing people. He's a lame version of CoffeeZilla in this universe. That said, his presence did put a major strain on Lin and the effort that he put in for this interview. After all, with a new host came new questions, and new questions could lead to undesirable consequences. Lin at this moment was walking a very dangerous slope, and should he break under the pressure, it was game over.
How many total commercials has Moon starred in? What's the runtime?
Lin, who had been previously freaking out, begins to calm down after hearing the first question. After all, it was something he could answer, which checks out considering he made all the ads that Moon starred in. He was also a devout follower of hers and probably had a shrine dedicated to her at home, like my boy Rudius does, and I would probably do the same for Miss J. I'm kidding, I'm just... So he answers the question with ease, right? And Lighter, not pleased with this current development, decides to step it up a notch and activate his lie detecting abilities.
So tell me, Nice, is Moon really your girlfriend?
This question put Lin in for a loop. After all, he didn't have a lot of ways to respond to such a question. Saying yes would simply be detected as a lie, as he wasn't really nice, and Moon was definitely not his girlfriend. However, saying no meant destroying his current image as Moon's boyfriend. It was truly a nasty question. He couldn't just give up though. After all, failure meant exposure. The consequences of that were unknown but definitely terrifying, so Lin just spoke his true thoughts.
Actually, Moon has always been my goddess.
The public was shocked at such a genuine confession. Lighter was just angry that it was true. For a second there, he was going to celebrate though, because in the beginning part of Lin's confession, he denied the claim that Moon was his girlfriend. Due to the latter portion though, his celebration was obviously cut short. But unwilling to leave without damaging Nice's image in some way, shape, or form, he calls in some backup. It probably would have worked as well if his backup didn't betray him last minute. You see, Lighter had called in Lin's old boss, Mr. Forehead, who had seemingly been fired after the incident. Lighter tries to share the information to the public on how Nice's company goes about making their ads. However, this was cut short after Lighter was swatted away by Forehead. Forehead was angry and only had thoughts of getting paid for all the work he put in, which is kind of valid. Like, if I'm working overtime and you promise to pay me but don't, bro, I'd be tweaking out too. I'd be tweaking out too, okay? This is pretty exciting, so I'll do my best to give you an entertaining play-by-play of the fight that ensues. Forehead dashes immediately and condenses this weird black goo into a whip. Pushing his arm forward, he slices the air in front of him. Nice grabs Moon and dodges. Instead, the building is brutally mangled. Missing terribly, Forehead retracts the whip and dashes in with a spirit bomb. Nice, too fast to handle, immediately step-sides the attack by wall running, and like a graceful ballerina, lands with ease. Forehead, growing increasingly angry, loads up 2 whips and begins swinging like a natural-born Australian. Nice rushes him and steps on his face like a king facing a peasant, backflipping and once again gracefully landing on the ground. Nice gets in close and begins his assault hand to hand. At this point, he's simply aura farming with how effortlessly he is dodging till he decides to end it with an elegant but impactful cross-section kick to the stomach, hitting that pose after it is done. Forehead is absolutely devastated and having no other options, rushes Nice once more. Unfazed and prepared, Nice stands his ground before hitting him with a chomp. Alas, Nice has no summoning move, so his enemy naturally stands up and with a greater ferocity than ever before. His hatred, anger, coupled with the fear, sorrow, and helplessness he ceded to others, coalesces into more raw power for him to win. Using it, he creates an AoE attack that farms even more of these negative emotions, prompting him to grow even stronger and earns him his second phase fit. I still had faith that Nice could win, however, after recollecting what happened to the original in the beginning of the episode, I naturally began to lose faith, coupled with the fact that after Forehead's power-up, Nice's attacks were just deemed ineffective. I began to say my goodbyes to Lin. Bro was a real one. These thoughts only continued to grow stronger as the fight went on. Nice began struggling to avoid Forehead's attacks with the same grace he once had until he was finally hit by Forehead's laser beam deadline. Hit by the attack, Nice begins to be affected by the black goo seeping from Forehead. Lin's inability to damage him, coupled with his past experiences, caused Forehead's influence over him to grow stronger. In the end, he loses faith. He gives into the negative thoughts and begins to fall. But like always with a gooner, his 2D waifu Moon comes to the rescue, somehow motivating him to keep fighting, to believe in himself, and to believe that like anyone else in this world, it is possible for him to be a hero. Finally accepting his place in this world's dice, forgoing his identity as Lin, he stands proud and faces Forehead's attack once more. This time, he holds his ground and with some effort breaks through and launches a punch onto Forehead's armor, destroying it and leaving Forehead out cold. This whole sequence gave me goosebumps. I loved every aspect of it. The mix of 3D and 2D, the shift to full 2D as soon as the fight was finishing up and things were getting serious. It all coupled together to make a phenomenal ending. As the fight came to a close though, Lin was finally able to accept who he now is, and in a conversation he had in a call ride with Miss J, he expresses these sentiments and is finally able to return home. However, when he gets home and ready to go to bed with his stolen girlfriend, he realizes she is all but... Hey, I don't know about you, but I'd be tweaking out if that ever happened to me. Sadly, I don't have a girlfriend, so I can't relate.